Hey guys, welcome to this week's FAQ and Freebie Friday. Now for those of you new to the channel, these videos are all about answering your health related questions. So if you have a question concerning your health, Chinese medicine, herbalism, something regarding nutrition, or really anything concerning health and wellness, and you'd like our help in answering that question, all you have to do is leave that question in the comment section below, and we'll be answering those based on popularity, the questions that we feel will be most beneficial to the community as a whole, and of course the questions that we are capable of answering. Something else great about these videos is that every week from the comment section, we select one lucky person at random to win a free bag of tonic herbs or medicinal mushrooms of their choice. So even if you don't have a health question for us this week, but you're interested in winning some free herbs or mushrooms, all you have to do to be entered to win is make sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, give this video a thumbs up, and just drop any old comment in the comment section below. And with all of that out of the way, let's get to this week's questions. Alright, so getting to our first question, this one is actually really interesting because there's a lot of conspiracy or controversy around it, very similarly to the effects of DHT on the prostate and really anything that usually regards estrogen. So this is including things like breast cancer, PCOS, and other conditions that are typically blamed on a deficiency of estrogen, usually is quite the opposite, as I'll discuss in a moment. So I think that this is an interesting question and one that should be explored a bit further. And that question reads, how can TCM help with endometrial atrophy? So for those of you that do not know, endometrial atrophy is referring to obviously the atrophying of the endometrial lining. Now this typically occurs sometime in the later years in a woman's life, usually sometime after menopause. Now, if you ask your doctor or if you look up anything in the conventional medicine world, you will find or you will be told that it's actually a deficiency of estrogen that causes this issue. However, that is completely untrue and actually the opposite of what's actually occurring in the biology. And this is something that I find to be true with a lot of conditions, again, as mentioned, that are regarding estrogen. The simplest way to perhaps look at this, other than the physiological effects of estrogen that we'll get into in a moment, is to understand that there are a lot of hormones in the body that decline with age. That is a fact. However, estrogen is not one of them. Estrogen, in fact, like cortisol and other stress substances, actually rise with aging, whereas androgens like testosterone, DHT, and other sex steroid hormones like progesterone tend to plummet. And this is typically the case in most pathologies regarding any disease or condition or stress state. For example, let's take a look at what happens to the female body during pregnancy. This is a prime example to understand what truly is happening in the hormones of a woman and how it relates to stress, aging, or health on the other hand. Typically what happens during a normal pregnancy, and bear with me if you've heard me say this multiple times before, what tends to happen during the early stages of pregnancy is there's a significant rise of progesterone. And progesterone, which is the hormone that basically makes a woman fertile and can contribute to male fertility through its effect on the production of testosterone, greatly opposes the effects of estrogen. In fact, estrogen and progesterone have an intimate relationship. When progesterone levels are low, this leaves estrogen unopposed, and basically the excess of estrogen unopposed by progesterone attributes to the pathology of every aging, stressed, or disease-like condition. So high estrogen is implicated in stress, aging, and pretty much every disease that you could think of due to its catabolic effects on the body. However, getting back to the example here, during the early stages of pregnancy, that pregnancy glow, the thickness of the hair, the glowing of the skin, the robust energy, the general feeling of well-being and the physical manifestation of that people compliment on all the time is directly due to the surplus of progesterone, which basically stimulates the metabolic system in a positive way. It ensures that you're in an anabolic, high energy state. Whereas estrogen has the opposite effect. It tends to stimulate a stress response and downregulates the metabolism to a less efficient metabolic state where you're not producing enough energy and the body is more stressed. Those are the basic mechanisms behind progesterone and estrogen. And from this point, of course, 10,000 things can go wrong. But the point here, the fact that I'm trying to point out is that high levels of progesterone diminish or keep estrogen levels in check, which contributes to the health and radiance that you see in a pregnant woman. However, what happens after a woman tends to give birth? Not always, but in most cases, this whole situation tends to reverse, and the woman starts to lose some of her hair, becomes thin and brittle, her skin starts to get all wacky, she gets acne and stuff, she starts to feel depressed, lethargic, and generally unwell. Well, this is because near the end of pregnancy, there's a massive inversion of these hormones. The progesterone plummets and the estrogen skyrockets. In connecting this hormonal imbalance to endometrial atrophy, one of the major reasons that this hormonal imbalance tends to occur, the reason that there's high estrogen, is to actually activate enzymes that break down hyaluronic acid in the tissue. So this is an acid that builds up your cartilage and all of the skin tissue and all of the collagen in your body. And specifically, it breaks down the cartilage and all the collagen tissue in the cervix so that way the vaginal canal can open up so a baby can pass through. That is completely on the behalf of estrogen, which directly stimulates the atrophying of the tissue in the cartilage in the cervix, as well as the stimulation of cortisol via estrogen that breaks down the cartilage in the skin tissue in the body in general. So looking at endometrial atrophy, this is largely caused by an excess of estrogen, not a deficiency, which is completely the opposite of what your doctor will tell you. However, don't just take my word for it. Obviously, this is a highly charged topic, but do some of your own research. I'll put some links and stuff beneath here. But based off of this one physiological fact, that estrogen stimulates the enzyme hyaluronidase, which basically breaks down the hyaluronic acid in your cartilage and in the collagen tissue to catabolize or atrophy the cartilage and various connective tissues in the cervix and in the whole body. That should tell you a lot about estrogen's role and its potential role in endometrial atrophy. In my understanding, anytime there's wasting-like conditions, whether that's in diabetes, autoimmune conditions, or this particular condition, you can guarantee that there's an excess of estrogen and cortisol, which are classic stress hormones. Estrogen is not the female hormone that we have been told it is. Many years ago, I think at least 200 years ago, physiologists referred to estrogen as the hormone of shock and stress, largely due to its catabolic stressful nature. And what I just described is just one of the many degenerative effects of excess estrogen. So in my understanding, as a woman ages, progesterone tends to plummet, leaving estrogen unopposed. Remember, these hormones are interrelated. So if anything, it's likely a progesterone deficiency and a massive excess of estrogen. So how can TCM help in this regard? Well, when it comes to hormonal imbalances, in both basic physiology and in TCM, the liver is responsible for the metabolization and the elimination of excess hormones. In fact, the liver, when impaired, cannot metabolize excess estrogen, and liver impairment is one of the major reasons estrogen tends to accumulate in the body in the first place. So I definitely recommend watching our video on how to do a liver detox for some tips from TCM as to how to improve liver function. So improving the health of the liver is definitely going to be a primary goal, but in this case, specifically to lower any excess estrogen in the body so that way it's not atrophying or catabolizing any tissue in your body at all. In addition to that video, I would definitely recommend watching any of the videos that we have here on the channel in regards to lowering or detoxing excess estrogen. We have additional herbal tips, dietary tips, lifestyle tips, and supplemental tips. All great tips for naturally lowering excess estrogen, which again is your primary goal in this specific condition. And lastly, given the relationship between progesterone and estrogen, and the fact that it's likely a progesterone deficiency that's causing endometrial atrophy, as well as a whole host of other issues, I would definitely recommend watching this video. All right, moving along to our second question. This one reads, how often can you take black ant extract before having to cycle off of it? I'm asking simply because I use it on training days for the ATP boost. Is there something just as potent as black ant extract? So from my personal experience, as well as my understanding of zinc's physiological functions in the body, and I say zinc because when you look at black ant, one of the major components to it is the surplus of zinc, which is generally a good thing. From my research and understanding, a large amount of people are zinc deficient, which is largely due to two primary reasons. One, a lot of people don't really eat enough zinc-rich foods. And they also tend to eat more foods that are rich in opposing elements and minerals like iron. So iron tends to, all the metals in the body tend to compete with one another. So when it comes to minerals, balance is key. And from my understanding, it's really easy to get an excess of iron, particularly if you're a male and have a low level amount of zinc and copper. So unless you're eating oysters every week or organ meats like liver, and you're also doing things to balance off the excess iron, it's likely that you have an excess of iron and a deficiency of zinc and copper. Also, zinc tends to be used up during stress due to its roles in the production of dopamine and other androgens in the body like testosterone. So if you're more stressed out, your requirements for zinc can also increase as well. Now, with that being said, me personally, I tend to supplement anything, whether it's black ant or any of the herbs or foods or whatever, based on needs. I kind of really pay attention to what my body's feeling. I also have a pretty good understanding of what's happening in the biology, so I can look for certain symptoms and I can go off of a feeling as well. This is something that anybody can do. And from there, kind of know, is this something I should be taking or not? Obviously, that relationship with your body takes time to cultivate. You might already have it. So that's one simple place to start. In addition to understanding the fact that most people are zinc deficient, and regularly supplementing black ant, or at least a couple of times a day, probably is not going to do you any harm. If anything, it just might correct that very popular mineral imbalance. And if you're also looking at it from the perspective of just kind of asking your body what it needs and paying attention to possible signs of a zinc deficiency. You know, are you getting sick? Or is your immune system starting to bog out? Do you feel more tired? Do you feel like you don't have as much as drive in the gym as you should? Is your sex drive getting low? If you don't have as robust of a sex drive, I've noticed that supplementing some black ant or some zinc rich foods in general tends to correct that sort of instantly. And that's really one simple way of kind of going off of that one parameter to determine whether or not you need more zinc or less zinc, etc. And then obviously you could look for potential signs of an excess or an overload of it. But I would just say from that standpoint, I think that you could use it probably every day, granted that you're not taking a ridiculous amount of it. So sticking to, you know, anywhere from a quarter teaspoon to maybe a teaspoon a day should be more than enough and safe to consume over the long term. And obviously, if you just find over time that you don't have an appetite for it, that's the simplest way I kind of determine my body's unique requirements. Do I have an appetite for this thing or a strong aversion to it? If you notice that the idea, just the thought of supplementing some black ant, putting it in coffee or whatever and taking it down is unappealing or highly unattractive, that's probably a sign that you don't need it. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing I would consider is that, you know, really the only issue that you could run into with taking too much black ant would be getting a surplus of zinc and throwing off the mineral balance in your body. However, as long as you're keeping your iron pretty low or doing things to mitigate the absorption of iron, like consuming coffee with iron-rich foods, and you're also consuming copper. This is the really important thing here, I think, looking at the basic mineral balance, is that you just want to make sure you have a good ratio, a good copper to zinc ratio. Generally speaking, you need copper. Like zinc, a lot of people are deficient in copper, but from my understanding, you want a higher zinc to copper ratio. When this ratio is inverted, having a large surplus of accumulated copper in the body is associated with a large variety of different issues. Everything from pigmentation issues of the skin, as well as things like autism tend to be, or are speculated to be caused or attributed to an accumulation of copper in the tissues. But also keep in mind that it's your thyroid, the thyroid hormone, that regulates the cellular use of copper. So something else to maybe consider is, you know, good thyroid function to ensure that you're using minerals appropriately. So to recap, so far, I think it's pretty much a safe herb to take on a regular basis, granted that the dose is normal in normal ranges. So again, a quarter to 1 teaspoon. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that zinc is one of the major deficient minerals and is balanced by other minerals, particularly copper and iron. You just want to keep your copper and iron lower than your zinc, but also ensure that you're getting those things by eating foods like liver and oysters particularly. The other thing that you're going to want to ensure is that your thyroid is functioning well, so that way you're not So that way you're actually using all of the minerals in your body appropriately. The other thing, the last thing I'll just say in regards to supplementing black ant is that if you want an alternative, if you still want to get that ATP boost, but you don't feel like you necessarily need any more zinc, then your alternative would be cordyceps, which is the second herb. There's only two that I know of that have as potent of effect. We made a video actually on the herbs that boost ATP. And in addition to black ant, because of the zinc and the actual exogenous ATP, cordyceps, and I think it's shistanch, if I remember correctly, are also ATP enhancing herbs. So they increase ATP synthesis, if you will. So if you want an alternative to the black ant, you could supplement with cordyceps, which I think is one of the best athletic performance enhancing herbs next to black ant and ashwagandha. Anyways, hopefully all of that helps and answers your question. All right, getting to our third and final question. This one should be pretty quick. It reads, in a podcast, Ray Pete suggested people over 40 to take a supplemental thyroid. What amount of desiccated thyroid would you consider a safe dosage which will not downregulate the body's own production? I'm currently taking 40 milligrams of Allergy Research Group Thyroid. Thank you. Okay, so there's a lot I could say about the supplementation of desiccated thyroid, as well as how the thyroid functions in the body in general. But some key things to keep in mind, answering your question directly right from the start, I think a safe dose, if you're to supplement a desiccated form, get the desiccated. A lot of the synthetic forms have additive compounds which actually impair the digestibility of it, so they tend to not even digest in the body. And this can actually contribute to hypothyroid, because if the active form in the synthetic thyroid isn't properly utilized, it will be converted back to T4. And having an abundance of T4, which is the inactive form, and not utilizing it or converting it can actually contribute to hypothyroid-like symptoms. So the safe way to go around this is to just stick to a desiccated natural thyroid supplement. But keep in mind, you'd have to get a prescription from your doctor for the supplementation of the desiccated thyroid. And the ideal dosage, I think, for most hypothyroid people is referred to as 1 grain. And 1 grain equates to, I think, 65 total milligrams of T4 and T3 in a ratio that's 4 to 1 or 1 to 4. So meaning that there's 1 part T3, the active form, to 4 parts T4. The problem with this is that from my research, people would be better off, most people, with a ratio of 1 to 3. So from my understanding, the body produces about 10 micrograms of T3 every hour, at least in a healthy and normal person. So when people are hypothyroid, a lot of the times their liver is the problem. They're not converting the T4 into the T3, so only taking the 1 to 4 ratio, the typical 1 grain, could not necessarily correct all of the issues. So the ideal condition would be that you find an active T3 and that you can, in addition to supplementing the 1 grain at night, take like 1 microgram per hour. So obviously this is gonna be harder to do because I don't know where you can even find the active T3. They're difficult to come by these days, but that'd be the ideal thing to do. If you can find somebody that sells the raw thyroid, then if you freeze dry it, the thing is that 1 thyroid gland, like a gram, I think, of the actual thyroid has like 16 grains or something in it. So you need to eat like a super, super small amount and wait to get the right amount of it. If you're a farmer, if you have your own chickens, something that you can do, something that I've done is just, you can literally, from animals that you hunt or kill, you can take the thyroid gland and throw it into a soup. So that's a safe way to get it. That's how we used to get thyroid back in the day. Thyroid hormone was a normal part of our diet, just like liver, kidney, heart, and all this other stuff. So it's not just hypothyroid people that should be supplementing with it. The only reason why you need desiccated thyroid, most people, is because if you go to any farm, you can't buy the thyroid gland because they sell it off to the manufacturers immediately. I think it's illegal to buy thyroid gland from somebody, from a farmer directly, unless it's, again, low key. But in the past, it was very common for you to go kill a chicken in your backyard and throw the whole animal into the pot to make a soup, and you're getting normal, natural amounts of every gland in there. So that's one way to go about it if you can't get the T3 and the 1 grain T3 to T4, but at the very least, what you could do is talk to your doctor about getting something like Nature Thyroid or WP Thyroid and get 1 grain and take that at night. But some other things to keep in mind, in addition to the large amount I've said so far, is that without adequate glucose, so if you're not eating enough carbohydrates and if you're not getting enough protein, your metabolic rate will always stay low, as well as if you're not getting enough calories, and you won't be able to convert or use that thyroid hormone. So there's a lot of factors to consider, tons of different things to consider that could be contributing to the hypothyroid. For example, you could take the T3 and in addition to the 1 grain T3 and T4, do all the right things, have the perfect medicine for it. But if your cortisol is high, that cortisol will constantly invert or deactivate your T3 back into T4 and into reverse T3. So there's tons of things to keep in mind. If you really want to learn like a full, complete, holistic program for healing the thyroid, definitely grab either one of my online courses on my site, which are more or less glorified thyroid driven courses. They'll just teach you every way that you can possibly heal your thyroid. So definitely check those out if you want to learn more. But to recap, what you're going to want is 1 grain of the desiccated thyroid. But because it's in a 1:4 ratio, if you can, find the active form of T3 and take a small amount, like 1 to 2 micrograms every like 2 hours or something to ensure that you're getting the active form in there, and also do everything you can to take care of that liver, because all hypothyroid conditions are usually caused by liver problems, excess estrogen, and excess cortisol. All right, guys, that brings this week's FAQ and Freebie Friday to a close. If you've enjoyed it and found it helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already and you want to see more videos just like this. And also, if you're interested in winning some free herbs or mushrooms, remember to follow those cues, give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe, but also leave a comment in the comment section below where we select our winners. And if you're wondering if you've won from last week's video, just head back to the comment section. We'll reply to somebody in that thread and let them know that they've won. Otherwise, that brings this video to a close. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.